You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. There you go. Welcome to the show, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the big show. We certainly appreciate you guys coming by. Thanks for being here. As always, the Chris Voss Show is a family that loves you but doesn't judge you. To all our new listeners, we've been having this New Year's resolution crowd come into the show. And after 15 years and millions of downloads, we're getting a 330% increase in volume this month of January. So if you're new to the show, we certainly appreciate you guys having here. Please stay. Don't be like the gym crowd who just goes to the gym for the first 2 months and then quits. We will improve your life, guaranteed. If you listen, but you have to listen. That's the deal. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1 on the TikTokity, and Chris Voss Facebook.com as well. We always have the most brilliant minds on here, the CEOs, the billionaires, the White House presidential advisors, the Pulitzer Prize winners, people that bring their stories, their learnings, their educating that they've done to the show, and they impart their knowledge upon you. And will change your life. If you don't have epiphanies or learn some new paradigms of the show, you better check your eardrums because they're full of wax. We have an amazing gentleman on the show. He's a multi-book author. His newest book is called The 2-But Rule. Turn negative thinking into positive solutions, which is always important to take and do. And it's currently in stock wherever fine books are sold. John Wolpert joins us on the show today. We'll be talking to him about his amazing book. He is an esteemed speaker, writer, and thinker in technology and business innovation. As a CEO, product executive, and advisor, he's been at the vanguard of technological breakthroughs from the early days of the web to the rise of artificial intelligence. John is known for founding Flywheel, a pioneer in the ride-hailing industry. His work at IBM made him a key figure in the evolution of open-source software, blockchain, and AI. He's co-founded global R&D consortia and industry standard bodies, and his thought leadership on open innovation has been showcased in the Harvard Business Review. He's led countless new venture workshops, spoken before the European Union and the Australian Parliament G'day, in his mission to help organizations work together to solve hard problems. Welcome to the show, John. How are you?
It's good to see you, Chris. I sound pretty good, especially with that sultry voice of yours.
You know, it's the 10 packs of cigarettes every day.
I got to do that. That's what I've got to do.
Yeah, you got to do the Kent thing with the no filters or menthol. That's it, right? Yeah. There you go.
The Lauren Bacall voice.
Yeah. I mean, I'll die of cancer next year, but this sounds great. So, John, give us your .coms. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
The 2-But Rule, all one thing. The 2-But Rule, 1T, very important, .com will get you to the book page, or just jwolpert.com, 1T also. Also, you can go to my Substack at 2buts.com. That's the number 2, BUTS.com, where all the buttheads hang out and support each other.
There you go. And make sure you use just 1T in the butt.
1T, please.
1T in the butt, or else you'll end up on my OnlyFans. So, John, give us a 30,000 overview of your book.
Yeah, so I was approached by Wiley a year and a half ago, and they wanted me to write the Blockchain is Dead book, and because I weirdly got into that space for a long time, and then decided it was a really terrible idea. And I said, no, that's too much negativity. And they said, we've got another book, and I pitched the 2-But Rule. I think the original title I pitched was Embracing Your Butt, and they like that. And yeah, it is a book full of adolescent butt jokes, but it's also kind of serious in that we have gotten to this point in society where we have this toxic positivity, where we have lost touch with our butts. We are afraid of our butts. We're running from our butts, which is hard to do. It takes commitment to run from your own butt.
Plus, it's always behind you, chasing you, so it's in your shadow.
I mean, the idea is that you really, success depends a lot on how much momentum you can muster, turning bad ideas into good ones, right? The mythology is that there's some innovator with a great idea. Spanx, you hear about Spanx and how she had this great idea, ignored all the negative thinking and made it happen. Finally, somebody believed in her. No, it's usually a terrible idea, and you evolve it. You turn it, you say, but that won't work. But it would have. But that also won't work. But it would if you keep doing that. In fact, you think back to Apollo 13, and imagine when the oxygen tank blows up, and they've got to scramble to save the lives of the crew. And the first idea was, okay, let's light up the main engine, turn the ship around, burn back to Earth. Mm-hmm. And the engineers said, but that's not a good idea because it could blow up. It might be damaged. Imagine if when they said that, the answer had been, oh, don't be so negative. That's how you do, right? Often two-but rule must be kind of like yes and I'm like, no. If Dr. Evil is suggesting to you to take over the world, you don't say yes and you say, but that's a terrible idea because you want your mommy to love you, and this will just make a lot of mommies hate you. But we could do this other thing instead.
Oh, so wow, I should change course then. We had Fred Hayes on the show too a couple of years ago. The nerves of steel those guys have that are astronauts for the Apollo 13 mission.
These guys really know how to hang on to their butts.
He didn't, unlike the Tom Hanks movie, he was complimentary to it, but he goes, we didn't break a sweat until we were coming in, or we were coming in from orbit, or we were coming in the atmosphere. And I think there was something that happened that made it a little weird. And he said, that's the only time he broke a sweat. Part of it is because they're trained.
Icy cool. Yeah.
They're trained through thousands of failures. They're trained for every if and or but, if you will. And, his cavalier to the whole thing was just like, we were going to be fine. You're just like,
people ask me why two butts, and I'm like, because failure is only an option when you stop on an odd numbered butt, right? So if you that really is the key. Sounds
like my dating,
right? But that didn't work, and done. Right? I'm fresh out of butts. But if you can muster another one, but it would work. Yeah.
There you go.
In my experience in research and engineering and doing stuff for IBM and research consortia, if you can do 5 rounds of the two-but rule, you'll have a pretty good invention more times than you think.
There you go.
Yeah.
So what is the two-but rule? Let's just lay a foundation on that.
Yeah, the boring term is momentum thinking. Right. So you want to maintain momentum. And in fact, you don't have to come up. There's lots of different kinds of butts, right? But I don't like that. But I would if. But you're a big dumb poopy head. But you wouldn't be if. And it's usually separated with the word because, right? But you're a big dumb poopy head because, which really helps. It's not a trite thing. Really, the deeper part of the two-but rule, and I called it the two-but rule and not momentum thinking because it's frankly just more fun to say. And we're trying to get this serious idea into society, right? We have generated a no buts allowed culture where terrible gig economy startups bulldoze whole service sectors, and it solved very few problems. Pile a dozen more on top. Social networks promise, community and deliver blows to social norms. And politics, don't get me started, right? We're just chasing each other's butts around. But I don't like that. Well, okay.
A lot of asses in politics, yeah.
Yeah. So these are the products of a no buts allowed culture, right? But and the important thing, and this really, I think the reason, one of my favorite quotes on the back of the book is from Jack Spear from NPR. And he says, I've read the book, and he did. He said, this needs to be read by both journalists and people in government to raise the level of discourse. Because the deep part of the book is about paying attention to the needs behind your intentions, right? So if you say, I want to do this, and if I think enough about why you want to do it, what you want to do is never as interesting or as important as why you want to do it, right? That's something I learned as a product person. If somebody says, I want a faster horse, you really want to listen to the word faster and why they want to go faster. Right, you can get to either a racing car or a Model T, depending on how you interpret what their real needs are. You want to honor those needs and then honor the objections you have to those needs. What motivates you to object to them? And then find a way to square those in a way that it's not just about compromise. In fact, compromise is a poor substitute to innovation, right? Compromise is like, here's a teeter-totter, a seesaw. You're only up when your friend's down, or you're both compromised in the middle and you're going nowhere, or you turn it into an airplane wing and you go up together, right? So the two-but rule is a way to get into that and to salvage a whole lot of very smart people who are getting written off, thrown out the door, or just generally ignored. They're pariahs, the buttheads, right? The people that say, but that won't work. Because nobody likes one butt guy, right? Nobody wants that, and they'll be kept around. The boss will keep them around until they overstep. But I got to think that the halls of mental health are filled with one butt guys. And we need to turn them into two butt guys, right? We don't want to silence them. They have good things to say. They're just giving you one butt. They need two. And ideally, in fact, this is the best advice I can give, is if you are a one butter and you're about to get fired, don't articulate your first butt until you have formulated your second. And I don't know if you're about you, but when I'm cutting in too quickly on a conversation or interrupting someone or throwing my butt out there, exposing my butt, I'm usually doing it because I'm afraid I'm going to forget what I wanted to say. It's very hard to forget what you want to say when you're formulating the second butt. And that gives you time. It slows you down and allows you to inject that insight at the right moment. You go from pariah to hero.
So is the intent of the two-but rule to flip negative thinking into positive solutions? Should I approach something? There's a lot of negative Nancys in the world. You cite some things in your book, but doing whatever that business thing might be is too expensive, but that won't work. As an entrepreneur, you hear that a lot. That's not going to work. Is just asking two butts in a row going to fix the problem, or do you have to focus on the second butt being a positive step and then comparing the two?
It's a very good question. First of all, I find that life is a chain of butts, right? And rarely just a single chain. You've really got to, usually it's, but that won't work. Well, we could try this, but that also won't work. We could try this. And sometimes you can't come up with a good second butt. And there's a chapter in the book called Elon Musk's Fuzzy Butt, which is one of my favorites. Next to my favorite chapter is Playing with Your Butt. It's just hilarious.
As long as there's no pictures of Elon, that's fine. Elon's butt.
No, fair. Okay. But in seriousness, Elon and people like him really know how to tackle a problem and they don't just gnaw on it like a dog with a bone. They also know how to maintain momentum. They're always bringing that second butt, no matter how crazy or silly it is. And a silly butt will get you out of a second butt doesn't have to be a particularly good butt. I was running an innovation incubator once, one of the biggest ones in history for IBM. And we were given this really gnarly problem to solve. And this new hire steps right up and says, "What if we?" And an engineer on the team didn't waste any time. He's like, "But that won't work." Boom.
Wow.
And I had just come off of this. I had just come off of a tour with an innovation consulting firm, fancy one in San Francisco. And there was somebody there that was always saying, but the butt, always bring two butts. Changed my life. And I said to this guy, I'm like, "But it would work if," and he rolls his eyes at me and he goes, "It would work if gravity was different." And sure enough, a second later, another engineer went, wait a minute. And that led to a project, generated a couple patents and got the attention of the top brass of the company.
Wow.
It was a good result. They maintain momentum. You don't have to come up with a particularly good second butt. Sometimes a stupid, silly, crazy, fuzzy butt will get you to a place that you weren't expecting.
This is why, as a man, I have a very fuzzy butt.
Yes.
Fuzzy everywhere, actually. But
you wouldn't if you shaved.
I mean, I'm not that kind of guy. I don't know what that means. You can just roll with that joke, folks. So discuss why toxic positivity and blind optimism can be just as harmful as constant naysaying.
I think it's toxic positivity is a pretty charged and overloaded term these days. So I'll dodge that and call it culture of avoidance. Right? We're really running away from even inside our own minds, right? It's very hard not to, when you have a negative thought, we're taught to run away from it. Don't want to be negative. What we need to do is embrace that. We got to look at it and go, hey, buddy, hey, negative thought. I'm your buddy. I'm here for you. And that allows you the mental stamina to unpack that and say, okay, what's going on with you? Let's see what we can do about that, right? So toxic positivity is just the team version of that, I think.
There you go.
It's avoidance.
So, this kind of reminds me, sometimes the negative but, or as you put it, or the negative notion, the negative comment is almost necessary sometimes to keep a grounding, or to give that paradox, maybe. There's probably another word I'm looking for, but to give an altruism maybe to good ideas too as well. So sometimes it's good to know, like basically what we used to call it looking the dragon in the mouth. I think there's some other variations of that, but that's what we called it. And one of the things we do is we sit down with whatever ideas we're working on, and we try and flush out all the negative aspects of it and decide whether we could live with the downside of the risks that we were taking. And if we could mitigate those risks by analyzing them or understanding what the downsides was, if we failed, it would propel us much better, partially because we looked the dragon in the mouth and said, we really don't want to get eaten or burned today.
Yeah, that really focuses the mind, right?
It really does.
There's a great story about Lewis and Clark in the book about how they came to this fork in the road that they weren't prepared for. They hadn't been advised that this fork in the river in the Missouri was there, and they didn't know what to do. It both looked like they could have been the route they needed to take, and most of their crew disagreed with the two captains, Lewis and Clark. They wanted to go one way. Most of the crew, including the expert at this, said go the other way. And so they didn't just pull rank or what have you, or go with the other guys. They said, okay, but we can burn it a half day. Let's go send 2 expeditions out. And they did. Came back, didn't have anything conclusive. Did it one more time. Found on that expedition several species unknown to science before then. So the unexpected result of embracing your butt. And then at the end, they actually went with Lewis and Clark's decision. But even then, most of the crew didn't want to go that way. But because they had honored the perspective of the crew and took the time, the crew did not resist. They had a party the night that they set out, and they went happily. So and even then they were like, but we can also send a scouting party overland to shorten the track back if we have to, if we're wrong. So you see it's not, if somebody wants to go left and you want to go right, you could say, but I don't want to go left, but we could go right. And that's really not a good example of the 2-but rule, but if you apply a silly but, you say, but if we grew giant legs and went left and right together, at least you're signaling that you're going to do it together. And that might take you somewhere.
There you go. So what are some step-by-step strategies for transforming momentum-killing objections into innovation rocket fuel?
I think the first thing, there's several, I could unpack that in several ways. There's a really good passage in the book for product people and entrepreneurs about using the 2-but rule to avoid confirmation bias in lean startup, right? So if you're going to go out and you're going to start a company and you're like, okay, we're going to run an experiment. This happened. So I was the CEO of Flywheel, which is the first ride hailing app. And I got clobbered by Uber. That was a fun story. I'll tell you all about it if you want. And there was a taxi driver coder I hired. If you're going to write a taxi app, hire a coder who's a taxi driver. That's a good idea. And he was a great guy, Kieran Farr. He runs his own stuff now. And Kieran said, hey, we should go. This was early in 2009. And it was not certain that every taxi driver had an iPhone or a smartphone at all. And we wanted to load the software on their iPhones because we'd only raised like about $1 million. So we needed to test that. So we told them all to go. We got on the dispatchers for all these taxi companies. We said, go to Bob's Donuts on Polk Street in San Francisco. Famous Bob, hole in the wall donut shop. We'll give you a donut and cup of coffee if you show us what phone you've got. And sure enough, they came in and there was like 28% had iPhones. Even then, we were like, great,
Wow.
we're on to something moving forward. Side note, I also met my future wife there.
Wow. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. So I got something out of it.
Yeah. You did. Let me ask you this. I was actually in a lift over the weekend. A car's in the shop. And so I took a lift. And the guy, I don't know why, because I was telling him how many Silicon Valley friends I have. And that my friend Robert Scoble was at
He's cool. I've
at,
known him. Yeah.
Yeah, he was at Loic's event that Loic used to put on in France or Europe. Louis, I forget his last name, but so he used to put on this event. And who was it? Who was the guy? Travis? What's his face from Uber? Yeah, and his little crew there. They were there to pitch Uber, and they were still just pitching this idea. On Robert's lap is Marissa Mayer, of Google fame, who eventually went on to waste a bunch of money at Yahoo.
Hey, I think if they had done what they did for Steve Jobs and Lou Gerstner and given her chairmanship and CEOship and be able to fire the board, she'd have had a better chance. They didn't give her that. That meant you cannot turn a company like that around without that kind of power. Yeah. So I don't think she had a fair shake.
We'll differ on that one. But Mr. Mayer was sitting on his lap, and I don't think she was CEO quality, honestly, in my book. But so Mr. Mayer is sitting on his lap, and Travis and the other guys are telling him about this fantastic idea of Uber. And so I told that to the driver, and somehow he decides to give me a whole historical lesson of the evolution of Uber. And I just shut up, and I'm just like, I'm not even going to try and cut him off. But he mentioned that there was an app that Uber had not really stole or hijacked or taken over. He's like, somebody had the Uber idea first with the app, and then Uber took
we did.
Is that you?
We had cars in a map. In fact, it's a great story. I was running an incubator for Best Buy for Brad Anderson and a guy named Rick Rommel and a guy named Cal Patel. And the idea was Brad Anderson wanted every budding entrepreneur to start their career at a Best Buy, learning customer centricity and stuff. So we would give them $50,000 and a team of 3 or 4, put them in LA for 9 weeks, and they could prove out their idea. So Daniel, he was a Geek Squad agent. He comes up with the first Cars in a Map app. True story. His idea was to do it for Geek Squad cars, so you could see them coming to deliver your TV or something. And they quickly discovered that was a bad idea in 2008. So they pivoted. So they go out to a party one night, and it's in LA, and they all come back complaining about how they could never find a cab in LA. They're like, they're everywhere, but you can never spot one because they're out of sight and out of mind. And somebody went, wait a minute, and said, wouldn't it be cabulous if we did that for cabs? And that resulted in the first cabs on a map app. There's a taxi booking app called Taxi Magic. I know the CEO from those days. And our difference was, and it was not an obvious thing, like, did it matter that that you could see the cars on the map? So again, we went out and did lean startup and walked up to people with a completely fake app that we wrote in 2 days and showed them cars driving around the map. We walk into the Transamerica building and go, hey, you need a ride home? Check this out. And if they tried to get their smartphone out of their pocket and download the app, then we would mark that, and we'd give them then we'd tell them it was fake and give them a coupon to get a hot dog or something, and say, hey, it's fake, but thank you.
Thanks.
And that gave us great data. Now, in both of those tests that I just told you about, we validated the idea, but we were not. We weren't leaning into our butts, right? So lean startup was fine, but we didn't lean into our butts. What we should have been doing is joyously going and looking for all of the other reasons it was not going to work. And one big one that we missed was that while taxi drivers had smartphones, enough to make a difference and for us to get started, they had jailbroken them back in the days when it was like the iPhone, 2 or 3, whatever it was, 3G, 2G, 3G. It couldn't handle data and voice at the same time. So these drivers would get on this chat line all day long with people that spoke their language mainly. Like there was the Eritrean chat line and everything. And they're like complaining that they're not getting any hails because they can't get the data. And that was a very expensive mistake. And it was because we were so happy that we saw that they had the smartphones that we didn't get interested in what other butts were out there. So you asked about just kind of coming around to pay off the promise. That's there's procedure to that. I mean, it's not just, hey, but it would work if, but it wouldn't if, or what have you.
Yeah. I wonder if it was you guys, because he said it was the company that had developed the GPS of it and into the app. And so they could see the thing. He said he'd been a driver since 2005. So I think he did taxis before he was doing Lyft. But it was kind of interesting conversation. At least that part of it was. The rest of it, he literally told me how Uber conquered the market. I'm just like, seriously, dude. Did I not tell you I have friends in Silicon Valley? Do you not think that I know this story like the back of my hand? I watched the whole thing go down.
Yeah, Uber. We thought. I remember Bill Gurley, who funded Uber, called me. I remember I was raising. We were finishing the raise, and we were the first thing funded. I'm told we were the first thing funded in Silicon Valley after the financial crash. It was mid 2009, and we only had like maybe 300,000 left in the round. Bill called me. I'll never forget it. I was standing in Pivotal Labs, and he said, "So how much is left in the round?" And I'm sweating because I'd never talked to Bill Gurley, and I knew he was. And he said, and I said 300, and he said, "No, that's not enough." And then we had this very nice conversation. I was stupid enough to not read the writing and say, "Okay, I'll just throw that term sheet out." I was still a Boy Scout. I was like, ethics. And I still am kind of a ethics guy. But yeah, he gave me really good advice. He's like, focus. I'm like, yeah, we're focused, San Francisco. It's like, no, South Beach. Focus on just being the perfect thing for South Beach. And that was really interesting. What Miami? I think Uber did, they really knew how to pick their butt. They had picked a different user entirely. My read of it, and I was pretty up close and personal with this, so I think this is true. And what I've heard from others is, consciously or unconsciously, they were serving, I'll call it, douchebag in the Castro trying to pick up a date with an iPhone and a limo in 2009, right? So you say, "Hey, look,
that's me.
My place or yours," and you pull out your iPhone and you say, "Look at this." And you if you get a Crown Victoria taxi coming late, that's not going to get you what you want. But that guy is also patient zero prime. He's going to tell everybody about his cool new toy,
and played with it,
and it's going to excite everyone else, because in those days it was get a taxi or get a limo for slightly more than a taxi. It wasn't like get a Prius for sometimes less than a taxi, as it is now. And yeah, that guy was perfect because you didn't have to change the product at all to serve everybody else. Mm-hmm. They were patient zero. Brilliant. I learned more from getting my butt kicked by Uber than anything I can remember.
There you go. Now you can be positive with your butts because you got your butt kicked. So there you go. Now, what have we touched on that's inside the book that we can educate people on and help tease them out to pick up the book?
Well, there's a ton of really good stories. There's a great story about Calendly. And if you haven't heard the Topia, I went on a story. It's great.
Please, I love Calendly. I love it.
Yeah. It's in the book. And it's a brilliant story about this guy had to face all the butts. I mean, everything. He had no money. He was from nowhere. He was just like software sales guy, enterprise sales guy from Atlanta, wasn't hanging out doing parties with VCs or incubators in the Valley. I mean, he didn't have any advantages. And he was picking this horribly hard problem that we had been trying to tackle since literally the 80s. So it wasn't like this brand new insight, all right? It was like, the calendar ping pong problem has been around forever, and everybody's tried to solve it. Microsoft tried it, Lotus tried to solve it, IBM, everybody. Dozens and dozens of companies that are dead now that tried to solve it. He's got no money, burns a 401k to fund it, doesn't have a CTO or a technical team, hires a Ukrainian technical team, which is usually not the right answer, but he gets a good one.
Depends which war they're in.
Suddenly. Huh? No, these guys were good.
Depends which war they're in. Sorry, we do Ukraine jokes on the show from time to time, and Russian ones too.
Yeah, it's good to be equal opportunity. Yeah. And then They run out of money. He runs out of money.
Oh, wow.
Just as they're finishing the product, everything is done except the payment system. But we don't have any way to get paid. So he can release the product, but he can't get paid. But he released it as a free product. And that's probably why we know them today.
Wow.
Because everybody went crazy about it at that point.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's so wonderful and easy to use. You mentioned the ping pong effect. I think you're referring to where you go, hey, should we meet? And you're like, yeah, let's do it. And then you're like, hey, what about tomorrow at 10? You're like, I can't do that. Tomorrow, Tuesday at 8. And you're like, no, I can't do that. Is that what you're referring to? What the ping pong?
Yeah, exactly. Like, when are you available? Tuesday, maybe? What time? And you're just back and forth. That's just a huge pain in the butt. And this Calendly really solved that. But there's no reason why did that one hit? It's fascinating. And so it's a really interesting story, and there's a lot more to it. Then there's a story about the long one at the very end of the book is, I took a real hard swing at applying the 2-butt rule to ocean plastic. And that one was daunting. Like, that took a lot of time and research and talking to a whole lot of people in that problem space.
Really?
And saying, okay, but this won't work, but this won't work. Yeah. And I'm like, if we can apply this and get anywhere on ocean plastic in that chapter, that was my sweating moment, because I was like, if I can't apply it to this, then I don't have a book.
Yeah. It's good.
And I'd already sold the book. So
yeah. So you had to make up something. No, I'm just kidding.
No, it was good. Yeah, no, I made it all up.
I throughout my business career, I started my first company, I was 18. There have been so many moments where I had ideas and either a partner would be like, yeah, I don't think that's going to work. Or I was like, God, I have this great idea. And if somehow we could innovate this, whether it's a business model inside of our business, a process model where you're like, if we can fix this one department and if things could flow better through it without so many hiccups and barriers, this could really be more profitable. And so being able to have that and you're like, well, what if we do this? What if we do that experimentation model? And that's really what made me successful. Was one of my last CEOs I worked for, he taught me to run just experiments, to try stuff. And sometimes he knew stuff was going to fail, but he would try to see if I could do it.
Oh, I call that the old but, right? But it didn't work for us in the 90s, but here's what went wrong. So when you try it again, you'll see it coming.
Yeah. So I told it was a real important lesson I learned and it's in my book, Beacon's Leadership. And what it was is one day he comes to me and I was like his experiment boy. That sounds weird. That sounds really weird, actually, now that I think about it. I was his experiment guy and his innovator. They used to call me I was the entrepreneur of the company. And so I could be his, kind of like his junior, and because he was busy running things, but he was really good at just seeing outside the box. Like you could work on a plan for whatever he wanted to innovate. You could sit and we could be like 2 months into it, beating our heads up against the wall. He'd walk in and be like, so where are you at with it? And we're like, right here, this is what it is. And he goes, but we can't get this to work. And he goes, do that. And then he'd leave and then everything would work. And you just hate the hell out of him, but he was a great man. Yeah. And I'm like, I want to be like that as a CEO someday, be able to see outside the box. And one day, part of what he sold edited and censored movies, much to Hollywood's chagrin up here in Utah. And he would mail the movies, much like Columbia House, out to, on a monthly, rental thing, out to the VCR movies, out to Christian communities throughout the South, and where there was just people who didn't like swearing, nudity, and violence in their movies, and. So we had hundreds of telemarketers, I don't know, 800,000 telemarketers in these giant buildings. And one day he says to me, he goes, hey, Chris, I want you to try something for me. And I go, okay. And he goes, I want you to go door to door and see if you can sell these movies. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? I get paid way too much to go door to door. And he goes, no, we got to see if this will work. I need you to run this experiment. And I'm like, okay. I get paid pretty well, so I'm going to go wearing a pair of shoes and a suit in the middle of summer. So I did that for 2 days. I literally went door to door, and I was dressed up pretty nice, and no one answered the door or come to the door. And this is the 90s, so there are people still at home, but almost no one would open the door and talk to me. I don't know. Maybe I don't know if I overdressed because they have Mormon missionaries that run around here. Maybe everyone just thought I was a Mormon missionary. But I pretty much wore a hole in some really expensive dress shoes and walked all over this neighborhood, killed myself for this experiment. I remember coming back to the office and I said, he goes, how'd it go? I go, dude, I might have like 3 doors open for me. I can't sell anything because I can't get the doors open. And I knocked. I showed him the neighborhoods that I worked, and we diversified it. And I'm like, dude, this doesn't work. And as I turn to walk out, he makes the comment, I guess it still doesn't work. And I stopped and I spun around and went, what did you say? And he goes, yeah, it still doesn't work. We tried it a few years ago, but I wanted to see if you can make it work.
Nice.
And so I started getting a little hot under the collar. I'm like, why the fuck would you send me out to do something that you knew wouldn't work? And he goes, Chris, it's about running experiments and testing things. He goes, a few years ago, we tested it. And he goes, I know if anybody could have made that work or figured out how to square that thing, it would have been you. And so basically what we learned is it still doesn't work. So sometimes market conditions change. Sometimes things change in the environment or buyers things. And so we need to test it. And I know with my confidence in you that if it would have worked, you would have figured out a way. So if it doesn't work, and there you go. Maybe we'll test it in a few more years. And it really hit me like a ton of bricks, mainly because I burned a hole. Very expensive.
I was waiting for you to say that, he said it didn't work, or, it still doesn't work. And you went, wait a minute. And then, got mad and made it work somehow. That would have been a good story too.
That would have been maybe a good story, but I don't think there was a way. But I was in the mood to take off his head, because 2 days of banging on doors when you're supposed to be an executive of a company is a little bit,
No, but that's the real deal, man. I mean, I was in taxis, not to go back to the Uber story, the flywheel story, but one of the most real experiences of my life, and one of the most proud things I've ever done, was be up at night in the middle of the night in taxi dispatch in the seedy part of San Francisco, or riding shotgun. I mean, every taxi driver in San Francisco used to know me and where I lived, because they'd come and try to get their units fixed in my house. I learned more about real stuff than I ever did doing middleware or object-oriented programming stuff at IBM or anywhere else. That was a real experience. So, I mean, getting on, burning through your shoes is honorable work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, the idea of the relationship thing that you mentioned struck me. I think more than any reason why I spent a year writing about butts was, I think we need to foster this culture of two-buttism, because if you're going to say, but that doesn't work, your team, you need a team that knows that you're going to come up with a second butt shortly, so that they let you get your first one out. Otherwise, resistance is going to come. If somebody's got an idea and you say, but it won't work, or, but I don't like that, resistance, right? But if we all know, right, if this can get into the zeitgeist, if it can get into the air, oh yeah, what's your second butt, man? Then it's fine, right? Then we've defused that problem, and we don't have to have the positivity police running around going, no killer phrases, whenever you're brainstorming. So that's, I think, a big reason I wrote the book. I should say before we wrap that in cases when you can't expose your butt to other people on your team, this is, I think, and we're checking, but I think this is true. I'll make the claim that the two-butt rule is the first, big idea book that launched from a major publisher, hit Barnes & Noble on the same day that the GPT on OpenAI launched as a companion. So you can go to jwolpert.com/2bgpt, number 2 GPT, number 2b GPT, and you'll find the two-butt rule GPT, and you can say, this is my intention, this is what I want to do, and it'll start going, but that won't work, but it would if, and you can elaborate from there. People are going bananas over this thing. Wow. It's coming up with some pretty crazy stuff. So I definitely go try it if you want to say, I intend to take over the world. But it's really interesting.
Yeah. I think, so many entrepreneurs, they get shut down. No, that'll never work. No, don't waste your time being an entrepreneur. No, don't develop that product. But you'll just fail, but you'll lose a lot of money, but you'll, 99% of businesses fail, blah, 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 blah. And the great thing about entrepreneurs is they go to that second but. They go, but what if, you can make this work? What if you can change the world? What if you can move mountains? What if you can put a dent in the universe? And I think
you need a butt that never runs out of gas.
Exactly. And some money and some luck. There you go.
Speaking of which, money, luck, and gas. If people can afford the gas to get to Columbia, South Carolina next week, on the 7th, 5 p.m. at the Boyd Innovation Center, the McNair Institute and Moore School and the Boyd Innovation Center are putting on a night of the two-butt rule, an innovators evening. You can find it on my website, and we'd love to have you there.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Anybody in the Southeast that wants to hang out with a bunch of innovators.
There you go. So it's been wonderful to have you on and insightful. Give us your final pitch on the show for people to order the book and .com where people can get it. Or
if you've got a team that is wallowing in negativity and can't get out of their own way, having circular arguments, and you need to achieve momentum, and you don't want to fire everybody that's seemingly negative, you might need some help. Get the book or go to jwolpert.com and engage me either with Team Rotary, which is a really wonderful platform that Bob Sutton and others at Stanford and Harvard have put up. It's kind of like a live masterclass. So you can engage me that way, or you can engage me to speak or come and help you out.
There you go. Thanks, John, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, you too, Chris. Thanks a lot.
There you go. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Order the book wherever fine books are sold. The two-butt rule. Turn negative thinking into positive solutions. Make sure you use a 1T on the butt part of that. Otherwise, you end up on my OnlyFans. You don't want to see that because that's just wrong. Anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss, one on the TikTok, and all those crazy places we're at. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time.